Your thumbnail is arguably the most important part of your video on YouTube, and that kinda sucks, but unfortunately, no matter how great your video is, if people aren't clicking on it, it doesn't really matter. And with more than 800 hours of content being uploaded every minute of every day, spending a little extra time to make your thumbnails grab people's attention is probably a good investment. It's easy to spend a ton of time on a video and then just quickly piece together a thumbnail while you wait for your video to upload. But realistically, on this platform, love it or hate it, your thumbnail is the #1 thing that's gonna get people to click on your video, aside from the algorithm not deciding to destroy you. And it can sometimes be tempting to look at some of the bigger channels for ideas for your thumbnails, and I think that you can definitely find a lot of inspiration there. But sometimes you can get sort of a false impression. Someone like Casey Neistat, for example, can upload a video that just has an out of context screenshot as the thumbnail, and it's gonna get millions of views. Because at this point, he's built a big enough audience where people know that no matter what the video is titled or what the thumbnail is, it's going to be interesting to watch. And his channel is big enough where YouTube itself will take over a lot of the promotion and recommending and getting the video out once he uploads it. But if you're like me and you're not quite at diamond play button status, then it is worth spending a little extra time on your thumbnail to make them stand out. I've even heard some people say that you should spend as much time on your thumbnail as the actual video itself. And I kind of think that might be like a little bit excessive, but it's a good insight into how much effort you should be spending on your thumbnail. I'm definitely not an expert, but I feel like I've developed a pretty decent thumbnail style over the past 2 years, and so I thought that by sharing some of my ideas, it might help you to come up with a thumbnail style all your own. I think a good place to start if you already have a channel and you have a decent selection of videos on that channel is to go through your videos and sort them by most popular. And then look at like your 5 most viewed videos and see if you notice any similarities between those thumbnails. And what works is probably gonna be a little different for every channel, but like for example, on my channel, I noticed that my most popular videos have thumbnails where there's a really dominant subject at the center of focus in the image. For you, you might notice that thumbnails that show your face do better, thumbnails that don't show your face do better, or using a specific font, or ones that have not enough text or do have some text. You'll probably start to notice something that makes people want to click on that video. So for me, once I realized that having a dominant subject in my thumbnail was really important, the next thing that actually leveled up my thumbnail game was to make sure that I set aside time to take an actual thumbnail photo instead of just relying on a screenshot. Screenshots can be okay sometimes, but if you take the time to use like a decent camera and a lens, if you're filming your videos with a DSLR and you just flip that into photo mode and now you're using the photo capabilities of that camera, and because it's an actual photo, it's usually much higher resolution than the video files themselves, so that gives you a lot more flexibility later on when you go to edit your thumbnail. This has become so important for me that I actually have to make notes to myself when I write out like a notes document that has my ideas for a video. In there, I have to remind myself like, take a thumbnail photo, or in a notebook, I put it as a checkbox, like take a thumbnail photo, because it's super easy to forget. Take this video, for example. I wanted to have a thumbnail that showed me working on thumbnails, but that's like kind of a hard thing to communicate. So rather than using like a screenshot or just taking a generic photo of myself, I actually took the time to set up a scene, to set up my camera, turn on my lights, and then, you know, make a bunch of dumb faces at the camera that tried to communicate what the video was gonna be about. Once I'm done taking my thumbnail photos, I put them into Lightroom and I delete the ones I don't like, and then I choose from the rest. I usually make a few basic color and lighting adjustments just to help the photo be as good as it can possibly be. With the thumbnail for this video, it kind of came down to what goofy facial expression I liked the most. Was it this one, or whatever's happening here? And in the end, I chose this picture just because it made me laugh the most. And I figured that if it actually evoked a genuine emotion from me, that would probably be a good thing to put as the thumbnail, because maybe it's gonna do that for somebody else too. Once I know which photo I'm gonna use, or I'm still choosing between a couple, I put those into Photoshop on a 1280 by 720 canvas, which sounds a little weird because that's lower resolution. YouTube says that you can upload 1920 by 1080 thumbnails, but personally, whenever I try to do that, I get a lot of error messages that say like your thumbnail's too big, file size too large, and I haven't had any issues with 1280 by 720. So you can try 1920 by 1080, and if it works for you, that is awesome. As you start paying more attention to your thumbnails, you'll begin to develop a more personal and clear style. So for example, one thing I do is I use all hand-drawn titles, and I'm proud to say that I haven't had a typed letter on a thumbnail or a video in almost 2 years, and nobody is going to care or notice. But it is one little thing that kind of adds to a clear brand identity for my channel. So hopefully when you see a thumbnail with a dominant subject and some big bold blue handwritten letters, you're gonna immediately know that that's one of my videos. And to do this, I actually just use Procreate on the iPad and the Apple Pencil. I do like to know exactly which photo I'm gonna use before I start drawing out my lettering, because depending on the photo's composition, that could determine how I want my lettering to go. Do I want it to be a bold title across the top? Do I want it to be some stacked words over to the side? Is there room for like a small sub-headline? All those things are determined by the photo itself. And so once I know that, it's gonna tell me exactly how much writing I can use on my thumbnail without totally overdoing it. For a lot of years, I taught a high school yearbook class, and one thing we did in yearbook was we worked with headlines and sub-headlines. So you'd have a page, and then you'd have a headline that grabbed the reader's attention, followed by a sub-headline that added a little bit more information. And so that's basically what I try to do with my thumbnails. I'll usually have just a few words in big, bold blue letters that really stand out and grab somebody's attention, and then I'll have some smaller letters written in just a thin white writing to kind of add a little more info about what that video is going to be about. So for example, with this video that you're watching right now, I know that I want the word thumbnail to be really big. So you're gonna see the image, you're gonna see the word thumbnail, and it's gonna immediately kind of tell you what the video is gonna be about. So I'll start out by drawing thumbnail. And looking at the photo itself, I'm right in the middle, and I don't really know where I could put the word thumbnail. I might be able to put it at the top really big, but I think what might look the most balanced is to break the word in two and kind of have like thumb on one side of me and nail on the other, maybe like kind of going behind me a little bit, and then that way it's gonna sort of fill the whole frame right behind me. So since these are gonna be blue, I just select blue, and then just start drawing out my letters. You could also put the photo directly into Procreate and draw right on top of it. I don't do that because I like to add a black stroke outline and even a little bit of a drop shadow to help pop the title out, and Procreate just doesn't have those options yet. And the good thing about using hand-drawn titles is you don't have to worry about them being perfect. Part of what makes them good is that they are imperfect. That's what makes them unique. So even though lots of people can do hand-drawn titles, everybody's looks a little bit different. I think that's super cool. I've talked about this in a few other videos about lettering, but for the bigger words, I outline the letters first. So rather than write them, I draw the shape of the letters, and then I just fill those in once I'm done. Kind of a lot of pressure here because since this is a video about thumbnails, it has to have like a good thumbnail. Once I'm finished, I just airdrop the Procreate layers as PNG files straight to my MacBook, where I can then add them in to Photoshop. And you really don't want to add too much text to your thumbnails, just enough to grab the reader's attention. I've also recently started adding in this black bar that kind of helps the writing pop out a little bit more. I really like it. It also ties into something at the end of my videos. I've been putting black bars kind of as I'm closing out my videos, and I have my like, hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other videos. So that way the thumbnail and the video are all like tied together as one cohesive unit. Here, I've already got the photo. I've already got this black bar. What I'm probably gonna do is split the word in half, like I said. So that way we've got thumb over on one side, which looks kind of goofy. And then I can just duplicate that layer and then add a mask that just blocks out the word thumb. That way I have two layers. One says thumb, one says nails. I can position those exactly where I want them on either side of me in the picture. what I always do with my letters is I do add a little bit of a drop shadow, as much as like that's kind of a big no-no in the world of graphic design. But whatever, and I add a stroke outline. Because again, remembering that these things are gonna be, for most people, super duper tiny, you really want them to pop out. You really want people to know what this video is about. So for this, people are gonna see this picture, they're gonna see this goofy looking face, and they're gonna know it's something to do with thumbnails, and it might look just quirky enough and just interesting enough that they'll want to click on it. Once I have the words exactly how I want them in terms of size and position, that's when I rasterize them, and then I just erase parts of them that should look like they're behind a subject in the photo. I know there are other ways to do this, but whatever, this is what works for me. So for example, right here, I would like the N on thumbnails to just pop out from behind me a little bit. I actually want the bottom of the M right here and the bottom of the B to go behind the iPad and my hand, just to give it some depth, so that way I'm popping out, the words are behind me. It's really cool when you can have your text and your image kind of interact like that. And now when we zoom out, perfect. It's really subtle, but it looks like the words are just a little bit behind me. Now that I've got that, I want to add in the white subheadline, which in this case is just gonna say how I make my, so it's how I make my thumbnails. And this is actually gonna be more simple. What I've started doing with my subheadlines is I've specifically tried not to make them perfect. Go, and then I just airdrop that. And I just drag that in to Photoshop. Play around with the same thing. I add a drop shadow, I add a stroke outline, and then I just resize it and reposition it. In this case, something like that looks pretty darn good. If it shows up like that size in your feed, it's still an interesting photo. And if it's projected on a TV, oh God, if it's projected on a TV really big, then it's still an interesting photo. It's also important to remember that if a video isn't doing as well as you'd hoped, you can always change the thumbnail, and assuming that the video itself is actually good, sometimes that can be all that it takes to kind of give it a jump start. I had a video on this channel which was up for about 6 months and barely hit 100 views, and then I decided to just change the thumbnail. I didn't touch anything else, I just put a better, more interesting thumbnail, and within 2 weeks it went up to like 20,000 views. And nothing else changed except the thumbnail. It's not always a magic cure that's gonna guarantee if you have the right thumbnail, your video is gonna do really well, but it is something that can definitely make a huge difference. And I do just want to re-emphasize that it's not all about views. That's not the only reason to make videos. There's something intrinsically rewarding about just creating something, even if it's just for you or your family and friends and nobody else ever sees it. The frustrating part, and where the thumbnails come in, is if you do want other people to see the thing that you've made and you put so much time, energy, and effort into it and people just aren't watching it, it can be pretty discouraging. So that's where having a really good thumbnail can sometimes make a huge difference. And if you're interested in trying to make your thumbnails more personal with hand lettering, I did put together a playlist of some lettering videos I've made. Some of them are about how to use Procreate, and others are just about hand lettering in general. That's a really cool way to kind of level up your thumbnail game.